Good morning, everybody. My name is Justin Wilson. I use he, him pronouns, and it is my pleasure as the Congregational Life Coordinator to welcome you here to our service at First Universalist Church of Rochester. If you are here for the first time this morning, we especially welcome you and are glad you are joining us. Thank you for making it to our worshiping community. We invite everybody to remain after for coffee hour in the Clara Barton Lounge behind me or online in the same Zoom link. There is a visitor's form on the back of your order of service, or by clicking the link in the chat. We ask you to fill this out so that we can stay connected, make sure you are getting all of our emails about events at the church, and so that we can offer you a welcome beyond what we can do here this Sunday morning. Today is a special day. We're welcoming new members into our congregation today, later in the service. And if you're interested in learning more about our faith and church, we have a newcomer circle meeting next Sunday after service. A continued reminder, if you have a big joy or sorrow in your heart this morning, we invite you to write it in the notebook here on the chancel or in the chat on Zoom anytime before the chalice is lit. So now is a good time online to enter those joys and sorrows, and in person, make sure you do those before the chalice is lit. I'm going to refer you to some of our announcements in the order of service and just highlight a couple things. We're still looking for volunteers to help assist with some of our people who are unhoused and staying in our alcoves. So see Michael or Adam on our board, or myself if you can't find them after service, to learn more about how to support them. If you have concerns about parking, especially as the weather starts to turn wintry, see me, as we may have a solution for you, some covered parking options that we have recently come into. And for coffee hour, we're always looking for more volunteers. See MJ, who's waving her hands there, or myself. But we're trying to make space as our church grows, and it's getting a little clustered there. So we're making some adjustments. We've set up a second coffee station and just want to encourage people to move through so everybody can get goodies and coffee and sit down. Okay, before we turn towards our neighbors for this morning's greeting, let's take a moment to turn towards the camera at the back corner next to the Progress Pride flag and offer a wave and greeting there. We're happy you're joining us this morning. If you're online, go ahead and pop a greeting into the chat to welcome each other. And for those here in person, let's turn towards our neighbors and offer a greeting this morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm Reverend Eileen, she, her. I want to invite you to stay risen in body or in spirit if you are, as we begin to sing our opening hymn. This morning, our opening hymn is number 322 in the gray hymnal, Thanks Be for These, and an extra thanks to our very own, the Gilberts, who wrote this hymn.
I've been a runner for 45 years, and I've taken a risk by continuing to run despite numerous challenges. Between 2015 and 2019, I ended up, after races, in 3 different emergency rooms, 2 urgent cares, had 2 surgeries for rotator cuff tears, lower back issues, and bruised ribs twice after falling while running. That was just in those 4 years. Several times I thought that I would have to stop running or at least stick to shorter races. But I love running. I love what it does for me. I love the running community, and I especially love doing a race with my wife and or with my daughters. A few years ago, my daughters gave me a small metal ID badge to attach to my running shoes. Besides the identifying information, there's a quote at the bottom of the tag. "Running is a mental sport. We're all insane." There's nicer words, but I kind of liked it. The most recent emergency room visit took place in 2017 after a race around Canandaigua Lake. When the race was over, my family and I returned to our motel room, and sometime in the night, I got out of bed and I passed out. When I came to, my wife and daughters were standing over me, and my wife said, "An ambulance is on its way." At first, I said, "Why? That isn't necessary." There was a knock on the door. First, the ambulance EMT walks in, followed by a deputy sheriff. "Okay, I'll be happy to go to the emergency room." I was not going to argue with that. Since that emergency room visit, I've been referred to a cardiologist, a nephrologist, an orthopedist, an orthopedic oncologist, and a hematologist for various reasons. Eventually, I was told that the reason for feeling sick after races is that I wasn't getting enough sodium. So I adjusted my race day diet and decided to continue running long races. Despite my history of misadventures, I believe that risking my body for the sake of joy and community has made me a better person, and so has being a member of the First Universalist Church. Similarly, love is a decision which comes with the risk of loss or hurt, and yet we all have a powerful longing for connection. And in that spirit, come, let us worship together. As Janice Mary Jones comes forward to light our chalice at First Universalist Church, and you light a chalice in your own homes, please join me in our chalice lighting words spoken in unison. May we be a people of welcome, here in heart and mind and spirit. And may we reach out to our community. Please rise in body or in spirit for our affirmation of faith. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity and fellowship. 3 years ago, I returned to First Universalist Church after an absence of approximately 10 years. Initially, it felt like a risk to return since I didn't really know what to expect. Maybe I would be questioned about why I left, and I didn't really want to go through that. However, it turned out to be the opposite of risk. I was welcomed back like the prodigal son, with enthusiasm, with acceptance, and loving kindness. Since that first Sunday back, I've been here almost every week. Also, I came to the realization that supporting First Universalist Church by donating what you can is not a risk, because this church has so much to offer for our members and our community. Please place your offering in the offering basket or give online by scanning the QR code on the back of the order of service. This would also be a great time to drop your visitor's form in the offering basket. For folks online, please click the link in the chat to give to First Universalist Church. Thank you for your generosity. This morning's offering will now be gratefully received.
I'm back. This weekend, we welcome at least 3 new members and their families to our congregation, and we are so grateful to have them among us. I want to lift up that we are not only a place of transformation which welcomes them in, but we are a place which is truly transformed by them. So with great joy, I will ask our new members, with their willing children, to come forward as their names are read. David Kuhn. Jay Joslin. And Nathan Kaufman. Welcome to First Universalist Church of Rochester. Having added their names to our membership book, our new members have already done their portion of the joining process. Now it is up to us to complete our part.
So I want to ask you if you are a member of this congregation. If you are a member of this congregation, would you rise in body or in spirit? Would you pop a little heart emoji in the chat if you're joining us on Zoom? I want to ask you for 3 commitments as a way of welcoming and connecting ourselves with these new members. So first, do you, as a community of hope, promise to move and work beside these new members as we all seek to enact a more just world? If so, you can say or type, "We do." We do. Second, do you, as a community of healing, promise to do your part in making this a place where these new members can bring their joys and their sorrows, their struggles and their celebrations? If so, please say or type, "We do." We do. And finally, as a community of heart, do you offer these new members the freedom and love to listen to the sacred, to experience wonder, and to make meaning as their hearts and consciences lead them? If so, please say or type, "We do." I thought you would. Welcome to the fullness of membership in our community. It is so good to join together on this journey. May our way be lit by the warm glow of community, the bright light of truth, and the fire of commitment. Amen. And welcome to these new members. Can I give you a hug? Can I give you a hug? And now it's time for a story. So if you're a young person or an older person, big or small, and if you'd like to listen to this story a little closer up and maybe even help me tell it, you can come sit up on the floor up front here. Oh my goodness, hop to the floor. I love it. And if you decide you want to move back to your grown-up at any time during the story, you can do that. And if you decide that you didn't come up when I called, but you want to later in the story, "Hi, Roman, I didn't know you were here," you can come up later in the story. Wow, look at all of us gathered. Do you know what? Good morning, Jojo. This is great for our story today because today our story is about a crowd. And this morning's story is from the Bible, from all 4 Gospels of the Bible, and it's a story called The Loaves and the Fishes. Has anybody ever heard this story before? You've probably heard it before, yes, Ewan. But if you don't remember it, that's okay, we're going to tell it again. So some of us know this story, and for some of us, maybe it's the first time, or maybe we heard it long ago, but part of us forgot. And we're going to tell this story from a different point of view today than we normally hear it. So in the story, a crowd has gathered, just like here this morning, only bigger. This crowd, the story said, has thousands and thousands of people in it. 5,000 maybe. And we're going to imagine ourselves in the perspective of a small child in the crowd, which is not usually how we tell this story. But today we are. So we're going to imagine that we are a small child. Let's call her Hannah, because that was a name that was common back then when this story is from and still is today. So Hannah is in the crowd, and she's been there all day. She's been in this crowd with her father, who is sick. They came because he's looking for healing, and the crowd spread a rumor that there was a man up front named Jesus who could heal people. A lot of the people who gathered in that crowd were there to be healed. They came because they were hungry, and they were tired. They were unwell, and Hannah can hear in the crowd rumbles of frustration. They're frustrated by how tired and sick and hungry they are. And Jesus has been there, this man they heard about, up on the top of the hill all day, teaching followers how to heal illnesses. And in fact, at the beginning of this chapter, we've learned that he's been going all around town teaching people how to heal themselves and helping to heal the people in this town from illness and injury, all the way back from the very first verse in this chapter. And we maybe imagine, if we're Hannah, that the people around us in the crowd are passing around medicines and herbal remedies and talking with one another and helping to heal one another. They're caring for one another and getting to know one another, because we've been sitting in this field on the hill all day long. And Jesus is up there, Hannah can see, preaching against Rome, which is the big empire that controls this land that we're in. Do you have a thought about Rome, Jahara? I'd love to hear it. Yeah, what is it? What is preaching? Well, in this instance, it's where he's standing up in front of the crowd, like I sometimes do, and he's offering them a story or a lesson. And we know what some of those sound like in other stories about him, but this one doesn't tell us exactly what he was saying. But we know that what the people came for were stories and songs and healing. So we could imagine that that's what Hannah hears him do, is tell stories and teach songs and heal people's illnesses. He's preaching against these ailments, probably saying that this hunger and this illness was brought on by Rome, that empire we just learned about, who has occupied this area where these people are living called Palestine. Just heard his name for the first time today? Well, welcome to learning about Jesus. Yeah, well, we all got to hear about him for the first time sometime. I'm glad it's today. And he's up there saying that all of these things the people are feeling frustrated about, their sickness, their tiredness, their hunger, that these things are the product of the empire and that they're not right. That the people are right to feel frustrated about these things, and that it doesn't have to be this way. And the people are feeling good. They're feeling like this is good community, like that feeling of good church. Do you ever go to church and you just don't want to leave because it felt so good? I hope once in a while that happens. Maybe not every Sunday, but some Sundays you know the feeling, right? And so Hannah's feeling that feeling. She's loving being with her community members and singing songs and hearing stories and finding the healing that they needed. But they're still pretty hungry. And Hannah overhears Jesus and his friends during a break in the preaching arguing. And they're arguing about how hungry everyone is. Jesus is telling his friends, feed the crowd. They're hungry. You need to feed them. And his friends are saying, we don't have enough food to feed them. We only brought our own dinner. It's 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. And there's probably 5,000 people here. Hannah hears them argue. We're almost as poor as the people we've gathered, and we can't afford to give away our dinner. Maybe we should send them home, and they can worry about their own food. And what do you think Jesus said? No. Yeah, Hannah hears him say, no, we're not going to send them home. They are in the worship today, and we're not going to break them out of it. Hannah looks into her own bag as she hears them arguing about food, and she remembers that she brought some dried fish from home and a handful of figs she picked from one of the trees on the road on the way here. It's not very much. And she sees this argument happening, and then Jesus' friends kind of sigh, and they go, okay. And they take their basket with their own small dinner, and they extend it out to offer to the crowd, to Hannah. They offer it to her, and she takes it, we imagine. She breaks off a little bit of the bread, and she thinks about how she doesn't have very much either, but she reaches into her bag and pulls out the figs that she picked on the way here and puts them in the basket before she passes it to the next person. And the next person was a family of goat herders, we imagine, sitting next to her. And so they maybe take part of one of the fish, but then they throw in a couple wheels of goat cheese and some dried meat that they have. And other neighbors have nothing, and they just take from the baskets. But others still send a fast child running down the hill to grab some food from home. Or others reach over to the trees on the edge of the crowd along the road and pick some more figs and pass those around. And by the end, everyone eats enough to feel full. And there are even leftovers. So many people have shared. And now we were told that this was the story of a miracle of loaves and fishes. And did you spot the miracle? When do you think the miracle happened? Jojo, where do you think the miracle happened? When the people got the food? Yeah, what do you think, Inara?
I think the miracle was that everybody got a bunch of food and they even had the leftovers.
Everybody had enough, and even more than enough. Felt like a miracle. Grown-ups, where did you spot the miracle? When did it start to happen? When they decided to share out what they had after they'd been shared with? I think maybe. That's where I like to find the miracle in this story. And this is the end of our story, but it's not quite the end of our time together, because every Sunday in November, we're collecting food for the Nestor Street Food Cupboard. So if there are folks who brought food today and they need some helpers to bring it forward, would you raise your hands up? And are you able to be helpers and go and grab some food? I see a couple people who have some over here and back there. Thank you, helpers. And thank you, givers. And we can put it all right here in this big pile of food. 12 baskets, I bet, at least. And now it's time for religious education. So if you would like to head upstairs with Ms. Liliana and Ms. Connie, you can meet at the door over here while we sing our doxology. Oh my goodness, Charlotte, you've got more. And we will sing our doxology while we celebrate our own miracle of loaves and fishes here up front, and while we head to religious education. So would you rise in body or in spirit and sing together? I invite you now into a reverent time of sharing joys and sorrows that we hold together. If you would like, you can place a hand over your heart to be able to listen from a heart-centered place. We know that so much is going on in the world today, and if you have joys or sorrows to share on behalf of our local or national or global community, you are always encouraged to do so. As Bill places stones into the bowl, I will read aloud the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. This morning we share concern about our own government waging war in Venezuela. We share in Kelly's joy and gratitude for everyone who sent her cards and notes. We share in a joy that Zoran Mamdani was elected the mayor of New York City, and hope for a new and better world. We share in Susan's sorrow that her mother passed away in her sleep last night at 98 years old. We share several gratitudes at folks who came in last weekend for cleaning and fixing up of our church space. We share in Kitty's joy for singing in the Soul Symphony last night, and many of our joys to hear it. We share with Michael a sadness for Kelly's ongoing struggle with cancer and frustration with the government shutdown, which prevents their daughter from flying here to be with her mom. And we share a joy with Kathy and Jim that their grandchildren are here to visit for the weekend. We share Marty and many of our joys that the elevator is back in service, that our building is more accessible than it's been in a long time. And we share with MJ in the gratitude for the coffee hour team who continues to show up and support each other and nourish the congregation. And today we also share in a community ritual to honor the many joys and sorrows we bring into this space, whether we've read them aloud or whether we keep them in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. In a moment, those here in person are invited to come forward and drop a stone in the bowls below. If you need to remain seated, you can always raise your hand and someone will bring a bowl to you. And if you are joining us online, please send a heart emoji into the meeting chat. Let us join in this collective ritual of honoring the joys and sorrows of us all now. Now the circle of our care is drawn larger, and may it increase forevermore. I invite us now into a time of prayer and centering, followed by some shared silence. So let's start by taking a breath and letting it out with a sigh. Perhaps your feet find the floor. Some part of you feels supported by this good earth and this good community, as we remember that whatever we hold in our hearts, we do not hold it alone. And I offer this prayer by Jan Richardson. We pray together that the table will be wide, and the welcome will be wide, and the arms will open wide to gather us in, and our hearts will open wide to receive. And we will come as children who trust there is enough, and we will come unhindered and free, and our aching will be met with bread, and our sorrow will be met with wine. And we will open our hands to the feast without shame, and we will turn toward one another without fear. And we will give up our appetite for despair. We will taste and know of delight. And we will become bread for a hungering world, and we will become drink for those who thirst. And the blessed will become the blessing, and everywhere will be the feast. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so. Our hymn of contemplation this month is number 96, number 396. I know this rose will open. I want to offer you a reading this morning, an excerpt from How We Show Up by Mia Birdsong, and she writes this. All of us have ancestral memory of what it's like to live connected, interdependent lives. We may be cut off or too far away from those traditions to claim them, but we can listen to our needs, our longings, and through ritual, rite, and practice build a way of being in the world that honors and makes tangible our connections to one another, to nature, and to spirit. This is a process of decolonization. Whether you are the descendants of colonizers or the colonized, or like many of us, both, all of our peoples have experienced the loss of something essential to our liberated well-being. Whether that was taken away from you or given away in the bargain to win power, it is a loss. Even if you are a more recent immigrant to America, you likely have your own colonization story. And navigating the American landscape means swimming in its slick of genocide, slavery, destruction, and extraction. All of us have something to shed, something to purge, so we can make room for the reclamation and reinvention of community and family. Creating relationships and connection outside the arrangements that our current culture presents to us can be exciting and liberating. We get to be creative, coming up with new ways to understand our connections to others and new ways of connecting. We get to throw out what we've learned to want and discover what we actually want and need. We get to uncover ways of belonging and loving that we didn't see before. But it can also be painful for a whole host of obvious and not so obvious reasons. We may encounter internal and external barriers. And if you're like me, it's easy to question everything to a disorienting degree that pushes you toward the abyss of nothingness. What pulls me away from that edge is understanding not just what expansive connection can look like, but what needs we all want met. We find our way back to ourselves, making more clear what our truth is by listening to the deep longing of our own heart. We long to be known. We long to give and receive support. We long for freedom and accountability. This is the end of the reading. One of the most moving moments in worship for me that you all might not even know about is when we have lifted up our joys and sorrows and are preparing to pray, and I say something like, "Whatever we are holding, we are not holding alone." Or, "In all our joys and sorrows, we promise to be with one another." And then I get to watch the collective release of fear that does insist on showing up over and over, doesn't it? That fear that maybe this time, though, on this one, you were alone. Every week I offer a small reminder that this is, in fact, as it appears, a community of mutual care. You are not alone here, no matter what feelings and needs you carried in. And when I do, I can see your shoulders relax, your long exhale, the peace on your faces, the hearts popping into the Zoom chat right here beside me. Sometimes the tears in your eyes, to remember what we already and always knew. Our loneliness is not inevitable. We long to be known. We long to give and receive, to know the freedom and the accountability of community. We have, as Mia Birdsong wrote, deep memory of interdependence. And almost none of us have escaped, by way of theft or bargain, the deep loss of it. Alongside all the joys and sorrows we carry in on Sunday mornings, there is among them always that specter of loss and loneliness. And ironically, we are not alone in our loneliness. According to a 2018 study, 1/4 of Americans don't have people in our lives who we feel understand us. Only half of us say we have daily meaningful interactions with others. At least 2 in 5 surveyed sometimes or always feel as though they lack companionship, that their relationships are not meaningful, that they are isolated from others, and that they are no longer close to anyone. Only 26% of us claim to know most of our neighbors, and a third of us have not interacted with any of them. And that's a diagnosis, but I don't think it's a condemnation. Sociologists have been documenting the loss of so-called third places for a couple of decades now. Third place, meaning a space where people can spend time that isn't work and isn't home, but is a third. A place where community can grow. There are so many reasons for this loss. We've continued to cut funding for public third places like parks and libraries. We've restructured much of our society to exist on the scale of cars rather than the scale of humans. So even in places where we spend our money, we no longer tend to spend our time. And we've shifted our focus to digital spaces, especially since 2020, especially since we have failed to keep our physical spaces safe and accessible to all of us. I think about our longing for community and the loss of it a lot as the employee of a third place. We hosted a Halloween event for our community members and anyone in the wider public a couple of weeks ago, knowing that this need exists. Many of you were there. And I've been thinking since then about how our Halloween celebrations are a kind of testing ground for community health. Because if we want the kind of traditional, as seen in the movies, Halloween night revelry, we need to have long ago first built a healthy community, right? I have watched my kids participate in that traditional Halloween celebration on Marion Street in the North Winton Village, where kids run up and down the street in costumes and neighbors stand in their elaborately decorated yards giving out treats to kids and hot cider or the occasional beer to adults. Music plays and some folks set up haunted driveways. The PTA of our neighborhood school collects donated costumes in advance so that the English as a secondary language teacher can bring kids who are new to this country on their first night of trick-or-treating. And none of that festivity is possible without having built a functional community first. First, we have to have safe, clean streets, built at a human level, so with sidewalks and streetlights. A density of housing where homes are close enough to walk to. Grown-up caregivers who are able to bring kids on an evening outing, a PTA, a neighborhood school, neighbors who are willing to invest in pure generosity with no expectation of return, and who are willing to tolerate noise and mess for the sake of community joy. We tried to create a version of that here in October because not every person has access to that kind of functional community. Fewer and fewer people do every year. So we offered up our safe space, a multitude of caring adults, food and treats given freely without expectation of return, an opportunity for telling stories, playing together, making art, and squealing with glee in the upstairs hallway. We charged people nothing. We, partly in thanks to Justin's thriftiness, bought almost nothing new to make it possible. It was not a consumer experience, and yet it did cost us something. It costs us something to participate in community, to rebuild the interdependence we have lost and that we still long for. It came at the cost of lots of us showing up without expectation, which came at the cost of building relational bonds in this space for generations, for years before last month. The cost of saying yes to things we might not get a whole lot out of personally. The cost of saying no to people we love, honestly and consistently enough that they trust our yeses. And importantly, on Marion Street and here and everywhere interdependent community is functioning, the cost is our own discomfort. The cost is our willingness to live with some noise and some mess, with the many needs of those we love and those we haven't learned to love yet. Especially for those of us whose needs are few and quiet for now. That discomfort is often the cost of community. When I was in my first year as minister at the UU Church in Canandaigua, by early winter, we suddenly had a whole mess of kids in worship every Sunday. And mess is really the right word for it. There were some literal messes, of course, and some relational mess, if I'm being honest, around the space that kids took up and the noises that they made. We weren't used to them. We had been comfortable before they and their families started showing up. That's what we thought. One Sunday, the worship associate recited the scripted bit of our welcoming words, letting families know how to access childcare, and then she ad-libbed the line, "But of course, children and their noises are welcome in this space." And I think every parent who was there that day came to me separately and told me how relieved they felt to hear that. They had longed to be known. So we said it every week. And most weeks we really meant it. Though I will admit it took some learning to sit with the discomfort of babies fussing or preschoolers rolling down the aisle or big kids dumping out the whole bin of Legos during meditation. It took me sitting with the discomfort of realizing that I would never think to blame an adult for being obviously bored during a service. I would blame the person in charge of creating that service, and that children deserved the same respect from me. So we learned to live with our discomfort until it wasn't so uncomfortable anymore. And one Sunday, sometime after we started saying every week that children and their noises were welcome, an elder congregant who had previously come to church alone every week walked in holding her husband's hand. "This is Darren," she told me, introducing him for the first time. "He's in the late stages of dementia, and I had been hiring a caregiver for him on Sunday mornings, because he often makes unexpected noises or moves or wanders around in a way that I thought would be too distracting for church. But hearing you say that children's noises are welcome made me think that Darren's might be too." And of course they were. His fellow congregants were glad to see him, glad to miss some of the sermon to hold his hand and make sure he didn't wander too near the exits, glad to be needed by him and his wife, glad at the discomfort his presence cost them. We long to give and receive. After Darren came back to us, I noticed one couple started bringing their adult daughter with developmental disabilities. Her noises were welcome in the service. Her needs were gladly received. Everyone, in fact, realized that what had felt comfortable before turned out to be a whole lot of rigidity that we were all freer without, once we were willing to invite discomfort in for a little bit. Everyone felt permission to show up more fully in worship, to move their bodies, to get up and go to the restroom if they needed, to laugh out loud, to sing out loud, to reply to the preaching out loud, to rest in the grace of their community, knowing that their whole messy and noisy self was welcome, and to welcome everyone else's. We long for the freedom and the accountability of being together. If we build a community that welcomes the discomfort of others' needs, we will have built one that welcomes us when we need it. If we build a community that knows how to be uncomfortable, that practices it by inviting the people whose needs are the loudest and the messiest, we will have also built a community that re-teaches the rest of us that our independence was always a lie. This kind of community is messy, it is noisy, it is often uncomfortable for those of us whose needs are quiet and few. And it is so worth it. Our story this morning was about a miracle. And it is a miraculous story. I believe that. In fact, it's all the more miraculous in that it's absolutely ordinary. My suspicions about the ordinariness of this miracle, and the reason I retold it from a different point of view, begin at the end of the story that we read in the Gospels. And it's why we told it the way we did today. In the text as it's written, Jesus' friends collected the leftovers from the meal, filling 12 baskets. And they had started with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes, only 7 total items. So you have to read that and think, what were all the extra baskets even for? Where did they come from? Korean liberation theology focuses on the crowd as one of the most important and overlooked characters of the Bible. The crowd is referenced in gospel stories pretty much wherever Jesus goes. They show up to seek wisdom, healing, help, food. They represent the most vulnerable, caught in the wake of the brutal power of Rome. They're who Jesus aligns himself with in all the stories about his life. And when we look at the crowd as a character and not as background scenery, we see that his alignment with vulnerability and the vulnerable tells its own story. We have this thread woven through where the authors of these stories use the crowd to communicate to power, these people and us, same side. These people and God, same side. And this side is so much bigger than you thought. We are a multitude. As a rhetorical device in these stories, Jesus' friends often serve as the literary foil for the crowd. The crowd has faith where his friends have doubt. And Jesus always has faith in the crowd, whereas most of his teaching to his friends is correction. And here's where I imagine the authors, these first century radicals, are saying, without saying in the loaves and the fishes miracle, Jesus decides to share what little they have, dinner for themselves, probably, distributed among thousands, because he trusts in the faith of the crowd, the faithfulness of the crowd. And we can imagine this crowd, this gathered community who have so little, who have been made poor, hungry, and sick by the might of empire, feel moved by the outstretched basket, by the trust that comes with the offering sent around. And so they add a little bit of whatever's in their own pockets. We can imagine that one outstretched arm defying the fear of scarcity was all it took. That one choice to face the discomfort of a day's hunger to feed a crowd facing a lifetime of hunger was all it took. That is the cost of community and its reward. The miracle, when the crowd is its own character, when the crowd matters, isn't a supernatural fish replication magic. It is about the contagiousness of care. It is a miracle of faith in one another. There's a question that I sometimes use as a group icebreaker about what would be on your apocalypse resume. Like, what are your end-of-the-world skills? What would you put on a resume of survival when everything falls apart? And people list things like first aid and triage ability, mending, knitting, weaving, bicycle and appliance repair, hunting, seed saving. Some folks list a willingness to liberate medicines from pharmacies or canned goods from stores. You learn a lot about people. But the skill that I think we really need, the more apocalyptic things get, whether it's zombies or robots or climate collapse, is faith in one another. Willingness to pay the cost of discomfort because we have faith in community. The world that falls apart when we pump fossil fuels into the sky or contaminate drinking water to make sad AI art or snatch food off the tables of hungry people was not a world built on the interdependence that our souls still remember. The skills for surviving have always been the things that we long for. To know one another and to be known. To give and receive. To live in the freedom and accountability of community. When I feel despair about potential apocalypse, which is not infrequent, I will will confess. Sometimes I scroll through my neighborhood mutual aid page. And I know it sounds silly, but it is like a modern-day loaves and fishes miracle in there. People giving and receiving in wild abundance, and it always writes my heart. One person offers packing foam, and that is literally trash, I think to myself. But it's exactly what her neighbor needs for a child's science fair project. And so that literal trash stays out of the landfill. Another one asks for a used laptop in order to start a new job and a new life. And that's far too big of a request, in my judgment. But he's offered the gift that he needs thrice. One neighbor asks for a gallon of milk for her children. Their SNAP card ran out and it won't be refilled until who knows when. And so many groceries show up on her porch an hour later that she has to come back to the group to offer some of them up because they can't eat them all before they expire. And if that's not the very definition of a miracle, the very same miracle Jesus was on to 2,000 years ago, I don't even know what is. When I lean too hard into despair instead of the discomfort of community, I need the reminder that in ordinary and powerful ways, we are already living the world we dream of. Reaching out to offer what little we have with enormous faith in the abundance of one another. And in case it isn't clear by now, that's what this is. That's what we're doing here in this third place. When we tell stories and sing songs and commit to the discomfort of noise and mess that is such a small price to pay for belonging. We do our best with what we have to heal the wounds that empire creates, to feed the hungry mouths it starves, to offer a life-giving alternative to the death cult of power. We are building a community of love and resilience where we can be known. We can give and receive in all our messy, noisy neediness. And we can live with the freedom and the cost of community. We are the miracle we have been longing for, my friends. And may it always be so. Amen. And would you rise in body or in spirit and sing together one last time today? Number 1098, Fire of Commitment. Please remain standing if you are, as Bill extinguishes our chalice flame this morning. And let us read together the words printed on the screen as he does. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. And as we close our service this morning, I invite you to place a hand over your heart. If you're joining us online, I invite you to turn your settings to gallery view and look upon the faces of those gathered with you. And for those of us in the room here, take a moment to look around at those with you here today. And I offer as a benediction these words from Adrienne Marie Brown. It is time to cover all that we love, land, creature, place, person. Intertwine your roots with mine, and in this way our lives become miracles. Amen. Everyone is invited to join us for coffee hour immediately after the service in the Clara Barton Lounge or online in the current Zoom meeting. I hope to see you there.